23. Before any definite step can be taken in a household, there must be either complete division or loving accord between husband and wife. When their relations are indefinite, it is impossible for them to make any move. Many families continue for years in their old ruts, hated by both husband and wife, merely because there is neither complete discord nor harmony. Both for Vronsky and for Anna, life in Moscow in the heat and dust, when the sun no longer shone as in spring, but burned as in summer, when all the trees on the boulevards had long been in leaf, and the leaves were already covered with dust, was intolerable. Nevertheless, they did not move to Vostivchensk, as they had long decided to do, but stayed in Moscow, which had become obnoxious to them both, because of late there had not been harmony between them. The irritation which divided them had no tangible cause, and all attempts at an explanation not only failed to clear it away, but increased it. It was an inner irritation, caused on her side by a diminution of his love for her, and on his by regret that for her sake he had placed himself in a distressing situation, which she, instead of trying to alleviate, made still harder. Neither of them spoke of the cause of their irritation, but each thought the other in the wrong, and at every opportunity tried to prove that this was so. For her, he, with all his habits, thoughts, wishes, mental and physical faculties, the whole of his nature, consisted of one thing only, love for women, and this love, she felt, ought to be wholly concentrated on her alone. This love was diminishing. Therefore, in her judgment, part of his love must have been transferred to other women, or to one other woman. She was jealous, not of any one woman, but of the diminution of his love. Not having as yet an object for her jealousy, she sought one. At the slightest hint, she transferred her jealousy from one object to another. Now she was jealous of the coarse women with whom, through his bachelor connections, he might so easily have intercourse. Now of the society women whom he might meet. Now of some imaginary girl whom he might marry after repudiating her. This last jealousy tormented her more than anything else, especially since in an expansive moment he had carelessly told her that his mother understood him so little that she had tried to persuade him to marry the young Princess Sorokina. And being jealous, Anna was indignant with him, and constantly sought reasons to justify her indignation. She blamed him for everything that was hard in her situation. The torture of expectation, living betwixt heaven and earth, which she endured there in Moscow. Karenina's dilatoriness and indecision, her loneliness, she attributed all to him. If he loved her, he would fully understand the difficulty of her situation, and would deliver her from it. That they were living in Moscow, instead of in the country, was also his fault. He could not live buried in the country as she desired. He needed society, and so he had placed her in this terrible position, the misery of which he would not understand. And it was likewise his fault that she was forever parted from her son. Even the rare moments of tenderness which occurred between them did not pacify her. In his tenderness, she now saw a tinge of calm assurance which had not been there before, and irritated her. It was growing dusk. Anna, all alone, awaiting his return from a bachelor dinner party, paced up and down his study, which was the room in which the street noises were least audible, recalling in detail every word of their yesterday's quarrel, passing ever backwards from the memorably offensive words of the quarrel to their cause. She at last got back to the beginning of their conversation. For a long time she could not believe that the dispute had begun from a perfectly inoffensive conversation about a matter that did not touch the hearts of either. Yet it was so. It had all begun by his laughing at high schools for girls, which he considered unnecessary, and she defended. He spoke disrespectfully of the education of women in general, and said that Hannah, her little English protégée, did not at all need to know physics. This provoked Anna. She saw in it a contemptuous allusion to her own knowledge, and she invented and uttered a phrase in retaliation which should revenge the pain he had caused her. I don't expect you to understand me and my feelings, as an affectionate man would, but I did expect ordinary delicacy, she said. And he really had flushed with vexation, and had said something disagreeable. She didn't remember her reply to it, but remembered that in answer he had said with obvious intent to hurt her too. I can take no interest in your partiality for that little girl, because I can see that it is unnatural. The cruelty with which he annihilated the world which she had so painfully constructed for herself, to be able to endure her hard life. The injustice of his accusation that she was dissembling and unnatural, roused her indignation. I am very sorry that only what is coarse and material is comprehensible and natural to you, she retorted, and left the room. When he came to her in the evening, they did not refer to the quarrel, but both felt that it was only smoothed over, not settled. Today he had been away from home all day, and she had felt so lonely, and it was so painful to feel herself at discord with him, that she wished to forget it all, to forgive and make it up with him. Wishing even to blame herself and to justify him, she said to herself, I am to blame. I am irritable and unreasonably jealous. I will make it up with him, and we will go back to the country. There, I shall be calmer. Unnatural. She suddenly remembered the word that had hurt her most, though it was not so much the word as his intention to pain her. I know what he wanted to say. He wanted to say that it is unnatural not to love one's own daughter, and yet to love another's child. What does he know of love for children, of my love for Sereja, whom I have given up for his sake? And that desire to hurt me? No, he must be in love with some other woman. It can't be anything else. Then, realizing that in her attempt to quiet herself, she had again completed the circle she had already gone round so often, and had returned to her former cause of irritation, she was horror-struck at herself. Is it possible that I can't take it on myself? She wondered, and began again from the beginning. He is truthful, he is honest, he loves me, I love him. In a few days I shall get my divorce. What more do I need? I need calm and confidence, and I will take the blame on myself. Yes, now as soon as he comes back, I will tell him I was to blame, though in fact I was not, and we will go away. And not to continue thinking, and not to yield to irritation, she rang and ordered her trunks to be brought, to pack their things for the country. At 10 o'clock, Vronsky returned. 24. Well, have you had a good time? She asked, coming out to meet him with a meek and repentant look on her face. Just as usual, he answered, perceiving at a glance that she was in one of her pleasant moods. He was already accustomed to these transitions, and today was specially glad, because he himself was in the best of spirits. What do I see? Ah, that's right, he said, pointing to the trunks in the anteroom. Yes, we must go away. I went for a drive, and it was so lovely that I longed to be in the country. There isn't anything to keep you, is there? It is my own wish. I'll come in a moment and we'll have a talk. I'll only go and change. Order tea. And he went into his room. There was something offensive in his saying, Ah, that's right, as one speaks to a child when it stops being capricious. And still more offensive was the contrast between her guilty tone and his self-confident one. For a moment she felt a desire to fight rising within her, but with an effort she mastered it, and met him with her former cheerfulness. When he returned, she told him, quietly repeating words she had prepared, how she had spent the day and her plans for the move to the country. Do you know, it came to me almost like an inspiration, said she. Why must we wait here for the divorce? Won't it do just as well in the country? I can't wait any longer. I don't want to hope. I don't want to hear anything about the divorce. I've made up my mind that it shall not influence my life any more. Do you agree? Ah, yes, he answered, looking uneasily at her excited face. "Well, and what have you been doing? Who was there?" she asked after a pause. Vronsky named the guests. "The dinner was capital, the boat races and everything quite nice. But in Moscow they can't get on without doing something ridiculous. Some sort of a lady turned up, the Queen of Sweden's swimming instructress, and displayed her art." "What? She swam?" asked Anna with a frown. "Yes, in some sort of red swimming costume. A hideous old creature." "Well then, when are we to be off?" "What an absurd fancy! And did she swim in some particular way?" asked Anna, without answering his question. "Nothing particular at all. I thought it was awfully absurd." "Well, when do you think of going?" Anna shook her head, as though driving away an unpleasant thought. "When are we going? Why, the sooner the better. We can't get ready by tomorrow. But the day after?" "Yes." "No, wait a bit. The day after tomorrow is Sunday, and I must go and see Mamma," said Vronsky, and became confused because as soon as he had mentioned his mother, he felt an intent and suspicious gaze fixed upon him. His embarrassment confirmed her suspicions. She flushed and moved away from him. It was no longer the Queen of Sweden's instructress, but the Princess Sorokina who lived in the country near Moscow with the Countess Vronskaya, who presented herself to Anna's imagination. "You could go there tomorrow," she said. "No, I tell you, the things about which I have to go, to fetch a power of attorney and some money, will not have arrived by tomorrow," he replied. "If that's so, then we won't go at all." "But why not?" "I won't go any later. Monday, or not at all." "Why is that?" said Vronsky, as if in surprise. "There's no sense in that." "You see no sense in it because you don't care at all about me. You don't want to understand what my life is. The one person I was interested in here was Hannah. You say that is all pretense. You said yesterday that I don't love my daughter, but pretend to love that English girl, and that it is unnatural. I should like to know what sort of life can be natural for me here." For a moment she recollected herself, and was horrified at having broken her resolution. Yet though she knew she was ruining her cause, she could not restrain herself, could not forbear pointing out to him how wrong he was, and could not submit to him. "I never said that. I only said that I do not sympathize with that sudden affection." "Why do you, who boast of your truthfulness, not speak the truth?" "I never boast and never tell untruths," he said softly, restraining his rising anger. "It's a great pity if you don't respect. Respect was invented to fill the empty place where love ought to be. But if you no longer love me, it would be better and more honorable to say so." "Dear me, this is becoming unbearable," exclaimed Vronsky, rising from his chair. And standing before her, he slowly brought out, "Why are you testing my patience?" He looked as if he could have said much more, but restrained himself. "It has its limits." "What do you mean by that?" she cried, glancing with terror at the definite expression of hatred on his whole face, and especially in the cruel, menacing eyes. "I mean to say," he began, but stopped. "I must ask what you want of me." "What can I want? I can only want you not to abandon me, as you are thinking of doing," she said, having understood all that he had left unsaid. "But I don't want that. That is secondary. What I want is love, and it is lacking. Therefore all is finished." She moved toward the door. "Stop! Stop!" said Vronsky, his brow still knit, but holding her back by the hand. "What is the matter? I said we must put off our departure for 3 days, and you replied that I lie, am not an honourable man." "Yes, and I repeat that a man who reproaches me because he has given up everything for my sake," said she, recalling the words of a still earlier quarrel, "is worse than a dishonourable man. He is a heartless man." "No, there are limits to one's endurance," he exclaimed, and quickly let go her hand. He hates me, that is clear, thought she, and silently, without looking round and with faltering steps, she left the room. He loves another woman, that is clearer still, she said to herself as she entered her own room. I want love, and it is lacking. So everything is finished, she repeated her own words, and it must be finished. But how? She asked herself, and sat down in the armchair before the looking-glass. Thoughts of where she would now go, to the aunt who had brought her up, to Dolly, or simply abroad by herself. Of what he was now doing, alone in the study, of whether this quarrel was final, or whether a reconciliation was still possible. Of what all her former Petersburg acquaintances would say of her now. How Karenina would regard it, and many other thoughts about what would happen now after the rupture, passed through her mind, but she did not give herself up entirely to these thoughts. In her soul there was another vague idea, which alone interested her, but of which she could not get hold. Again remembering Karenina, she also remembered her illness after her confinement, and the feeling that never left her at that time. She remembered her words. Why did I not die? And her feelings then. And suddenly she understood what was in her soul. Yes, that was a thought which would solve everything. Yes, to die. Alexis Alexandrovich's shame and disgrace, and Serge's, and my own terrible shame, all will be saved by my death. If I die, he too will repent, will pity me, will love me, and will suffer on my account. With a fixed smile of self-pity on her lips, she sat in the chair, taking off and putting on the rings on her left hand, and vividly picturing to herself, from various points of view, his feelings after she was dead. Sounds of approaching steps, his steps, distracted her thoughts. Pretending to be putting away her rings, she did not even turn round. He came up to her, and taking her hand, said softly, Anna, let us go the day after tomorrow if you wish it. I will agree to anything. She remained silent. What is it? He asked. You know yourself, said she, and at the same moment, unable to restrain herself any longer, she burst into tears. Abandon me, she murmured between her sobs. I will go away tomorrow. I will do more. What am I? A depraved woman. A stone round your neck. I don't wish to torment you. I don't. I will set you free. You don't love me. You love someone else. Vronsky implored her to be calm, and assured her that there was not an atom of foundation for her jealousy, and that he never had ceased, and never would cease, to love her, that he loved her more than ever. Anna, why torture yourself and me like this? He said, kissing her hands. His face now wore a tender expression, and she thought she detected in his voice the sound of tears, and their moisture on her hand. And instantly her despairing jealousy changed into desperate, passionate tenderness. She embraced him, and covered his head, his neck, and his hands with kisses. "25. Feeling that they were entirely reconciled, next morning Anna began actively to make preparations for their move. Though it was not settled whether they would go on the Monday or on the Tuesday, as each the night before had yielded to the other's wish, Anna made all ready for their start, feeling now quite indifferent whether they went a day sooner or later. She stood in her room before an open trunk, sorting clothes, when he came in earlier than usual, and ready dressed. I will go to Mamma at once. She can send me the money through Igorov, and I shall be ready to go tomorrow, said he. Good as the mood she was in might be, the reference to the move to the country pricked her. Oh no, I shall not be ready myself, she said, and immediately thought. So it was possible to arrange things as I wished. No, do as you wish to. Go to the dining room. I will come directly. I will only sort out these things that are not wanted, she said, placing some more articles on the heap of old clothes already piled up on Anushka's arms. Vronsky was eating his beefsteak when she entered the dining room. You would hardly believe how disgusting these rooms have become to me, she said, sitting down to her coffee beside him. There is nothing worse than these furnished apartments. They are expressionless and soulless. This clock, the curtains, and above all, the wallpapers, are a nightmare. I think of Vostivchenk as of a promised land. You're not sending off the horses yet? No, they will follow us. Are you driving out anywhere? I wanted to go to the Wilsons to take her address. So it is decided that we go tomorrow, she said in a cheerful voice, but suddenly her face changed. Vronsky's valet came in to fetch a receipt for a telegram from Petersburg. There was nothing odd in his receiving a telegram, but, as if wishing to hide something from her, he told the man that the receipt was in his study, and hastily turned to her, saying, I shall certainly get everything ready tomorrow. From whom was the telegram? She asked, not listening to him. From Stiva, he replied reluctantly. Why didn't you show it to me? What secret can Stiva have from me? Vronsky called back the valet and told him to bring the telegram. I didn't wish to show it to you, because Stiva has a passion for telegraphing. What is the use of telegraphing when nothing has been settled? About the divorce? Yes, but he wires, could get no answer, promises a decisive answer soon. But read it yourself. Anna took the telegram with trembling hands and saw exactly what Vronsky had said. But at the end were added the words, Little hope, but I'll do everything possible and impossible. I said yesterday that it is all the same to me when I get the divorce, or even whether I get it at all, she said, flushing. There was no need at all to conceal it from me. And she thought, in the same way he may hide and is hiding from me his correspondence with women. Oh, Yashvin wanted to come this morning with Voitov, said Vronsky. It seems he has won from Pevtsov all and even more than Pevtsov can pay. About 60,000 rubles. But why do you imagine, said she, irritated at his intimating to her so obviously by this change of subject, that he saw she was losing her temper, that this news interests me so much that it is necessary to conceal it. I said that I don't want to think about it, and I wish that you were as little interested in it as I am. It interests me because I like definiteness, he replied. Definiteness depends not on forms, but on love, she said, growing more and more irritated, not at his words, but at the tone of cool tranquillity with which he spoke. Why do you want it? Oh God, again about love, he thought with a wry face. Don't you know why? For your own sake and for that of the children we may have, said he. We shan't have any. That's a great pity, he said. You want it for the children, but you don't think of me, she pursued, quite forgetting or not hearing that he said, for your own sake and for the children. The possibility of having children had long been a subject of dispute, and it irritated her. She explained his desire to have children as showing that he did not value her beauty. Oh, I said for your sake, most of all for your sake, he repeated, his face contorted as with pain, because I am convinced that the great deal of your irritability is due to our indefinite position. Yes, there it is. Now he has stopped pretending, and all his cold hatred for me is apparent, she thought, not listening to his words, but gazing with horror at the cold and cruel judge who looked out of his eyes provokingly. That is not the reason, she said, and I can't even understand how what you call my irritability can be caused by that. I am entirely in your power. What indefiniteness of position is there? Quite the contrary. I'm very sorry you don't wish to understand me, he interrupted, stubbornly intent on expressing his thought. The indefiniteness consists in your imagining that I am free. "You may be perfectly at rest on that matter," she rejoined, and turning away she began to drink her coffee. She took her cup, sticking out her little finger, and raised it to her mouth. After a few sips she glanced at him, and from the expression of his face clearly realized that her hand, her movement, and the sound made by her lips were repulsive to him. "It is perfectly indifferent to me what your mother thinks and whom she wishes to marry you to," she went on, putting down her cup with a trembling hand. "But we are not talking about that." "Yes, about that very thing. And believe me, a heartless woman, be she old or young, your mother or a stranger, does not interest me, and I don't want to have anything to do with her." "Anna, I beg you not to speak disrespectfully of my mother. A woman whose heart has not divined wherein her son's happiness and honour lies has no heart. I repeat my request that you should not speak disrespectfully of my mother, whom I respect," said he, raising his voice and looking sternly at her. She did not reply. Looking intently at his face and hands, she remembered their reconciliation the day before, and his passionate caresses in all their details. Just such caresses he has lavished, and wants to lavish, on other women, she thought. "You don't love your mother. It's all words, words, words," she said, looking at him with hatred. "If that's so, we must decide. And I've decided," she said, and was about to go away. But just then Yashvin entered. Anna said, "Good morning," and stopped. Why, when a storm was raging within her, and she felt that she was at a turning point which might lead to terrible consequences, why she need, at that moment, dissemble before a stranger who sooner or later would know all about it, she did not know. But immediately calming the storm within her, she sat down again and began talking to the visitor. "Well, how are your affairs? Has the money been paid?" she asked Yashvin. "Oh, I don't know. I don't think I shall get it at all. And on Wednesday I must go." "And you?" asked Yashvin, looking at Vronsky with half-closed eyes, and evidently divining that there had been a quarrel. "The day after tomorrow, I believe," replied Vronsky. "But you have been meaning to go for a long time past." "Yes, but now it's decided," said Anna, looking straight into Vronsky's eyes with an expression that told him he must not think of the possibility of a reconciliation. "Is it possible you are not sorry for that unfortunate Pavtsov?" she said, continuing her conversation with Yashvin. "I never asked myself, Anna Arkadyevna, whether I'm sorry or not. You see, my whole fortune is here," and he pointed to his side pocket, "and now I'm a rich man. But I shall go to the club tonight, and shall perhaps leave it a beggar. You see, he who sits down to play against me wishes to leave me without a shirt, and I treat him the same. So we struggle, and therein lies the pleasure." "But supposing you were married, how would your wife feel about it?" asked Anna. Yashvin laughed. "I expect that's why I never married, and never meant to." "How about Helsingfors?" said Vronsky, joining in the conversation, and he glanced at Anna, who had smiled. Meeting his look, her face suddenly assumed a coldly severe expression, as if to say, "It is not forgotten, it is still the same." "Is it possible you were ever in love?" she asked Yashvin. "Oh, heavens, how many times! But you see, some men find it possible to sit down to cards, and yet to be able always to leave when the time comes for an assignation. Now I can engage in love-making, but always so as not to be late for cards in the evening. That's how I manage." "No, I'm not asking about that, but about the real thing." She was going to say Helsingfors, but didn't want to repeat the word Vronsky had used. Voitov, who was buying a horse from Vronsky, arrived, and Anna rose and left the room. Before leaving the house, Vronsky came to her room. She wished to pretend to be looking for something on the table, but feeling ashamed of the pretense, looked straight into his face with a cold expression. "What do you want?" she asked in French. "Gambata's certificate. I've sold him," he replied in a tone which said more clearly than words, I've no time for explanations, and they would lead to nothing. I'm not at all in the wrong toward her, he thought. If she wants to punish herself, so much the worse for her. But, as he was going out, he thought she said something, and suddenly his heart ached with pity for her. What, Anna? Nothing, she answered, in the same cold, quiet manner. If it's nothing, then tant pis, he thought, again chilled. Turning away, he went out. As he was going out, he caught sight in a looking-glass of her pale face and trembling lips. He even wished to stop and say a comforting word to her, but his legs carried him out of the room before he had thought of anything to say. All that day he spent away from home, and when he returned late at night, the maid told him that Anna Arkadyevna had a headache, and asked him not to go to her room.